You never dated officially. You never lived together. You never had the relationship status or the shared life that would justify the devastation you feel. But here you are, months or maybe years later, still carrying this person like a wound that won't heal, still feeling their absence like a phantom limb, still unable to explain to anyone why you're so destroyed by someone who was never really yours. Your friends tell you to move on, that it wasn't even a real relationship, that you're making too much of a few deep conversations. And part of you agrees with them, feels ridiculous for suffering this much over something that never officially happened. But another part of you knows that what you experienced was more real than most relationships you've witnessed, that the connection you felt was profound even if it never manifested in conventional ways. If you've ever felt insane for grieving someone you never actually dated, if you've been unable to explain why a connection that existed mostly in conversations and charged moments devastated you more than actual relationships, if you felt ashamed for not being able to move on from something that looks like nothing from the outside, but felt like everything on the inside, if you've wondered whether you invented the depth you felt, or whether you're broken for being unable to release someone who was never really in your life, then what I'm about to share will transform everything you understand about why this hurts so profoundly and what you're actually trying to overcome. Carl Jung discovered something that will completely validate the pain you've been minimizing and feeling embarrassed about. After decades of studying the deepest layers of human consciousness, he found that empaths don't experience relationships the way most people do. For you, a relationship doesn't require official status or conventional structure to be real. It exists in the psychic realm, in the space of recognition and resonance and profound seeing. When you connected with this person at soul level, when you had those conversations that went deeper than most people go in years of dating, when you felt seen in ways you'd never experienced before, your psyche registered this as a bond, as something real and significant regardless of whether it ever translated into official relationship. Jung called this participation mystique, a fusion at the unconscious level that creates actual psychological entanglement even without physical relationship. Your friends see nothing because nothing happened in the external world. But everything happened in the internal world, in the realm where empaths actually experience connection. You formed what Jung would have recognized as a soul bond, an energetic entanglement, a psychological merger. The fact that it never became a relationship in the conventional sense doesn't diminish its reality or make your grief less legitimate. You're not crazy for hurting this much. You're experiencing the dissolution of something profoundly real even though it never manifested in ways others can see or validate. But here's what Jung understood that changes everything. The devastation you feel isn't primarily about losing this specific person. It's about losing access to a version of yourself that only existed in proximity to them. Losing the possibility you imagined. Losing the meaning you gave to those profound moments. You're grieving multiple losses simultaneously, and most of them have more to do with you than with them. The person you can't get over is actually a carrier for projections of your own unlived potential, your own unmet needs, your own parts that came alive during those electric moments of connection. If you're starting to suspect that what you're trying to overcome isn't actually the person but something involving your own psyche and patterns, share in the comments just one word: projections. Because Jung believed that recognizing what we're actually grieving is the first step toward healing what's been keeping us trapped. The paradox that empaths experience with twin flame connections that never officially happened is what Jung called the reality of the imaginal realm. In your mind, you had a relationship. In the psychic space where you actually live, you were together. You had countless conversations with them in your head. You imagined scenarios where you finally came together. You felt them across distance. You experienced synchronicities that seemed to confirm the connection. You built an entire internal relationship that was vivid and consuming, even though in external reality, maybe you only had a few deep conversations and some charged moments. Your rational mind knows this internal relationship wasn't real in the conventional sense, but your unconscious mind experienced it as completely real. This is why you can't just move on. Something did happen, just not in the realm where most people experience relationship. It happened in the imaginal realm, the space between inner and outer reality where empaths actually live most of their lives. Jung studied this phenomenon and found that for empaths with highly developed imaginal capacities, the internal experience of relationship can be more powerful than the external experience. But here's where Jung's insight becomes both validating and challenging. The fact that your experience was real doesn't mean your interpretation was accurate. Yes, you felt something profound. Yes, the connection was genuine. But the meaning you gave to those feelings, the story you created about what the connection signified, the belief that this person was your twin flame or destined partner, this interpretation was your psyche's way of making sense of overwhelming intensity. The twin flame narrative offers a story that makes sense of intensity. This person is your other half. You're meant to be together. The connection is eternal even if circumstances are keeping you apart. Jung would have asked you to examine whether the twin flame story is serving your growth or preventing it, whether believing they're your destined partner is keeping you trapped in waiting rather than living. What if this person wasn't your twin flame but a catalyst? What if the recognition was real but not meant to become partnership? What if the intensity signified activation rather than destiny? These questions aren't meant to diminish what you felt. They're meant to free you from interpretations that keep you stuck. The projection that Jung identified as central to these connections is particularly powerful for empaths, because you're capable of seeing potential in people they haven't actualized yet. When you met this person, you didn't just see who they were. You saw who they could become, what they were capable of. You fell in love not with the person standing in front of you, but with your vision of who they could be. And that vision was actually a projection of your own unlived potential. Jung called this anima or animus projection, where you see in another person qualities that exist in your own psyche but haven't been integrated into your conscious personality. Every quality you recognized in them that made them seem extraordinary, every depth you perceived, this was your own psyche showing you aspects of yourself that you haven't claimed yet. The reason you can't get over them isn't because they were so special. It's because they were carrying projections of your own specialness, your own depth, your own unlived possibilities. Think about what specifically drew you to this person. Their creativity, emotional depth, authenticity, freedom, intensity, ability to see you. Now ask yourself Jung's crucial question. How many of these qualities were dormant in you when you met them? The magnetic pull you felt wasn't just attraction to them. It was your soul recognizing its own reflection, your psyche trying to reclaim parts of yourself that you'd been hiding. This explains why the connection felt so profound, even though it never manifested into relationship. You were encountering yourself through them, seeing possibilities for who you could become. The idealization that happens in these never-realized connections is particularly intense for empaths, because you never had to deal with the person's actual humanity. They remain perfect in your mind because reality never had a chance to disappoint you. You never had to navigate their bad moods, their limitations, their unconscious patterns. They exist in your psyche as an idealized image, and you're comparing every available person to this impossible standard, which is actually a projection of your own ideal self. Jung called this the inflation of the beloved, where the person becomes more than human in your imagination. This inflation serves a function. It allows you to avoid confronting that maybe they weren't actually capable of the depth you imagined. Maybe the connection was more significant to you than it was to them. Maintaining the idealization protects you from grief, but as long as you maintain it, you remain trapped. You can't grieve what you've made sacred. The work isn't getting over them. The work is seeing them clearly for the first time, recognizing them as a human being rather than an archetype. The reason empaths can't get over twin flames they never had is deeply connected to what Jung called the savior complex, the unconscious belief that your love could rescue someone, that your recognition of their potential could activate it. You weren't just attracted to who they were. You were attracted to the project of helping them become who you saw they could be. When they didn't pursue relationship with you, it felt like rejection of your love's transformative power. Jung found that empaths often unconsciously choose people who need saving because it allows them to feel valuable, needed, significant. But when that person doesn't choose you, doesn't seem to need your saving, it threatens your entire sense of purpose and value. You're not just grieving the loss of a person. You're grieving the loss of your role as their awakener, their catalyst. The person you're trying to get over has become entangled with your sense of identity and purpose. But Jung would have told you that basing your value on your ability to save others is a recipe for perpetual suffering. Real value is inherent, not earned through service. Real purpose comes from your own individuation, not from catalyzing someone else's growth. Real love offers without attachment to outcome, recognizes without needing recognition to manifest as relationship. The childhood patterns that Jung identified as underlying these impossible attachments are usually about not being chosen, not being seen, not being valued by the people who mattered most. Maybe you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable, and you spent your childhood trying to earn their attention. Maybe you had a sibling who was favored. Maybe you experienced social exclusion and learned that your depth made you too much for ordinary connection. When you met this person and felt briefly seen, briefly recognized, it activated the deepest longing from childhood, to finally be chosen by someone who sees you fully. But when they didn't pursue relationship, it recreated the original wound with devastating precision. Once again, you weren't enough. Once again, being seen didn't translate into being chosen. This person has become the carrier for all your accumulated rejection, and releasing them feels impossible because you're not just releasing them. You're releasing the hope that if you could just get them to choose you, it would somehow heal every time anyone failed to choose you. Jung called this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate childhood wounds in adult relationships. You're not actually trying to get over this specific person. You're trying to heal from every time you've been unchosen, unseen, unvalued. But Jung discovered that you can't heal childhood wounds through adult romantic validation. The wounds live in the past and need to be addressed there through inner work. You need to go back to your younger self who learned they weren't enough and offer that child what no one offered then. The understanding that being unchosen wasn't about your worth, that your depth was never too much, that you were always valuable regardless of who could see it. If you're recognizing that layers of childhood wounding are entangled with your inability to release this person, sometimes the journey requires more structured support. There's a resource specifically designed for this territory called Your Pain Was Not in Vain, a Jungian guide to transform the pain of impossible love into self-knowledge and inner strength. It includes practices for inner child work, projection withdrawal, and healing the original wounds that make present rejection feel catastrophic. If something in you recognizes you need this deeper level of support, the link is in the first pinned comment. The hypersensitivity that makes empaths unable to get over these connections is what Jung called porous boundaries, where you absorb others' emotions, take on their energy, merge with their psychological states. When you connected with this person, you probably didn't just feel your own feelings. You felt theirs too, or what you believed were theirs. And you believed that what you were sensing meant they were feeling the connection as intensely as you were. But Jung found that empaths often mistake their own projected feelings for the other person's actual experience. You were feeling your own longing and believing it was mutual. You were sensing your own need for connection and interpreting it as their need. The person you connected with might have enjoyed the conversations, appreciated the recognition, felt something meaningful. But they probably weren't experiencing the merger that you were experiencing, weren't carrying the significance you were carrying, weren't building the internal relationship you were building. This is why they could move on while you remained stuck. They had a few meaningful interactions. You had a soul-level encounter that reorganized your entire psyche. They experienced moments of connection. You experienced cosmic recognition. And now you can't understand why they're not as affected as you are. Jung would have told you that recognizing this asymmetry is crucial for releasing the grip this connection has on you. They weren't experiencing what you were experiencing. The mutuality you believed existed was partly real and partly your projection. The difficulty empaths have establishing boundaries is what keeps you entangled with twin flames you never had. Jung found that healthy relationship requires clear boundaries between self and other, the ability to distinguish your feelings from someone else's feelings. But empaths with weak boundaries experience relationships as merger, fusion, entanglement. You don't just connect with someone, you dissolve into them, absorb them, become psychically entwined. This is why a connection that never became a relationship can still feel like you lost your other half. At the psychological level where you experienced the connection, you did merge with them. Parts of you became entangled with what you imagined them to be, and now separating feels like tearing yourself apart. But Jung understood that this kind of merger isn't intimacy. It's lack of individuation, failure to develop as a separate self. Real intimacy requires two whole people choosing to share their lives while maintaining individual integrity. The work Jung prescribed for empaths with boundary issues is learning to feel deeply without losing yourself, to connect profoundly without merging. This requires developing what he called ego strength, a solid sense of self that remains stable even in the presence of intense connection. You need to know where you end and others begin, to maintain your center even when experiencing profound recognition. As you develop boundaries, you'll notice that the intensity of your attachment to this twin flame starts to diminish. Not because you care less, but because you're no longer dissolved in them. The version of yourself that only existed in proximity to this person, the one you're actually grieving, is what Jung called the projected self. The idealized image of who you could be that you saw reflected through their recognition. When they looked at you with depth, when they really listened, when they engaged with your intensity, you felt like your best self. And when they withdrew, you lost access to that version of yourself. You've been trying to get them back because you've been trying to get that self back. But Jung discovered that this self you experienced near them wasn't created by them. It was activated by them, called forth by the recognition their presence seemed to provide. The qualities you accessed when you were with them, your depth, your authenticity, your creativity, all of this lives in you permanently. You don't need their presence to access it. You need to give yourself the permission and recognition you were receiving from them. This is the real work of getting over a twin flame you never had. You're not trying to forget a person. You're trying to integrate the parts of yourself that came alive near them, to make those qualities available in your daily life rather than only in their presence. You're trying to become for yourself what you thought they were for you, the witness, the permission giver, the one who sees your depth and values it. Jung called this process self-integration, owning qualities you've been projecting onto others. Every quality you saw in them that made them irreplaceable is a quality you need to develop in yourself. Their capacity to see you deeply becomes your work of seeing yourself. Their permission for your intensity becomes your permission. Their recognition of your value becomes your self-recognition. You stop seeking outside yourself what you're learning to provide internally. This integration doesn't happen through affirmations. It requires what Jung called active imagination and shadow work, consciously engaging with the parts of yourself you've been denying. The key that unlocks empaths from these impossible attachments is recognizing that you're not trying to get over a person, but to integrate an experience. Not trying to forget someone, but to reclaim yourself. The person was a trigger, a catalyst, a mirror. The real transformation is about what was activated in you, not about what existed between you. When you understand this, the whole framing shifts. You stop asking, "How do I get over them?" and start asking, "What am I meant to learn from this? What parts of myself am I being called to integrate?" Jung found that empaths who make this shift stop being haunted by the twin flame they never had because they're no longer trying to get the person back. They're working on becoming whole, developing the qualities they projected, accessing the depths that were activated. The twin flame becomes less significant because you're becoming your own source of depth, recognition, value. The path Jung outlined for healing involves several specific practices. First is the withdrawal of projections through conscious examination of what you actually saw in them versus what you imagined. Second is ritual completion of the relationship that never was. Jung understood that the psyche needs symbolic closure for experiences that remain open-ended. You might write the letter you never sent, saying everything you needed to say, then ceremonially burn it or release it to water, creating symbolic completion. Third is conscious grieving of all the layers of loss. You need to feel the pain of losing the person, the fantasy relationship, the future you imagined, the version of yourself that existed near them. The faith that soul recognition guarantees partnership. Each layer needs to be felt before it can release. Fourth is the redirection of energy toward your own life, your own projects, your own growth. Every time you notice yourself obsessing about them, you consciously redirect towards something you're building. Fifth is the development of boundaries and ego strength so you don't immediately recreate this pattern. You need to understand what made you vulnerable to this kind of attachment so you can make different choices next time. This usually involves examining your childhood patterns around being unchosen, your need to save others, your tendency to merge rather than maintain boundaries, the reconstruction of your identity after releasing a twin flame you never had, is what Jung called the emergence of authentic personality. You've been defining yourself through this connection, organizing your life around hope of eventual relationship. Now you need to discover who you are without it, what you want independently of them. Jung found that this reconstruction often reveals that the self you were performing in relationship to them wasn't your authentic self at all. You were being who you thought they needed, offering what you believed would make them choose you. What if your authentic self was never really on offer? What if you were so busy trying to be chosen that you never showed them who you actually are? Jung would have told you that this possibility is liberating because it means their lack of choice doesn't reflect on your authentic value. They rejected a performance, not your essence. The work becomes discovering your authentic self beneath the performance layers, understanding what you actually value rather than what you think will make you valuable. The channeling of your depth into purpose rather than into unavailable people is what Jung identified as the mature use of empathic gifts. You've been pouring your capacity for profound seeing into this one person who didn't receive it. All that energy, all that depth, has been focused on someone who isn't available. What if you redirected that same energy toward people who actually need it, causes that could use it, creative projects that could be built from it, your own growth that's been neglected? Jung found that empaths trapped in twin flame attachment often discover they've been avoiding their actual purpose by staying focused on impossible romance. The twin flame becomes a convenient distraction from the scarier work of showing up fully in your own life, using your gifts in the world. As long as you're obsessing about someone unavailable, you don't have to risk putting your real gifts out into the world where they could be rejected. But what if this person's unavailability is exactly what frees you to finally channel your depth where it actually matters? The relationships with available people that become possible once you've released the twin flame you never had are what Jung called conscious partnerships, based on mutual presence rather than projection. These relationships might not feel as electric as the twin flame connection because they're not activating your wounds, not recreating your childhood patterns. They feel different because they're healthier, more stable, more real. Jung found that empaths often dismiss available people as boring because they're comparing them to the idealized twin flame. But Jung would have told you that the person who seems less exciting might actually be offering you something more valuable. The opportunity to be seen in your full humanity, to show up consistently, to build something sustainable. This doesn't mean settling for someone who doesn't meet you at depth. It means recognizing that depth in available relationship looks different from intensity in impossible connection. The question Jung would have you ask isn't, can they match the intensity of my twin flame? But can they show up consistently? Can they see me in my ordinariness as well as my extraordinariness? Can they handle my depth over time? Can they build something real with me? These are the questions that lead to actual partnership rather than perpetual fantasy. As you begin opening to available people, you might notice that your twin flame's hold on you loosens naturally because you're investing your energy in something real rather than something imagined. The final integration that Jung identified involves transforming your relationship with the twin flame from attachment to gratitude. You can acknowledge they played a significant role in your development without needing them to play any further role. You can feel grateful for what they activated without needing to maintain connection. They served their purpose, which was catalyzing growth, not providing partnership. This gratitude doesn't require forgiving them or staying in contact. It's about recognizing that your suffering served your growth, that your pain composted into wisdom. If you're recognizing yourself in this exploration of being unable to get over a twin flame you never really had, if you're beginning to see that what you're trying to overcome isn't just a person, but patterns, projections, and parts of yourself, if you're feeling ready to do the deep work of reclaiming yourself from the fantasy and building your actual life, I want you to know that what you felt was real even though it never manifested as relationship, that your grief is valid even though others can't see what you lost, that you're not crazy for suffering this much. The work you're being called to isn't easy. It requires withdrawing projections you've been living in, grieving losses that others don't understand, developing boundaries you've never had, discovering who you are beneath the performance. For empaths ready to transform this experience into genuine self-knowledge rather than remaining haunted by what never was, your pain was not in vain. A Jungian guide to transform the pain of impossible love into self-knowledge and inner strength offers 30 days of structured practices specifically designed for each stage of this releasing and reclaiming process. If you feel this is your moment to go deeper into understanding what's actually happening beneath your inability to move on, the link is in the first pinned comment. This material exists to support you in transforming this experience into the growth it was always meant to catalyze. Your twin flame wasn't your other half waiting to be found. They were a mirror reflecting parts of yourself waiting to be claimed. The connection was real. The recognition was genuine. The activation was profound. But the interpretation that they're your destined partner, that you're meant to be together, that the universe is orchestrating your reunion, this is the story that needs to dissolve for you to grow. The real twin flame journey isn't union with them. It's union with yourself, integration of the parts you've been projecting, reclamation of the depths you've been denying. Jung's final wisdom about twin flames you never had is this: you're not losing something precious. You're discovering something more precious. You're not giving up on profound love, you're redirecting it toward people who can actually receive it and toward yourself who desperately needs it. You're not moving on from depth. You're learning to create depth in your actual life rather than maintaining it in fantasy. The person you need to come back to isn't them. It's you. If this exploration has helped you see your experience differently, if you're beginning to understand that releasing them isn't betraying the connection but honoring what it was meant to teach you, share in the comments what quality or part of yourself you're ready to reclaim from this projection. Because Jung believed that naming what we're taking back gives us permission to finally have it for ourselves, and your willingness to choose yourself might inspire someone else to do the same. And if this journey has resonated with your experience, please subscribe so we can continue exploring these depths together. And share this with someone who might need to know that they're not crazy for grieving something that never officially was, that their pain is valid, that their depth deserves to be offered to their own life and to people who are actually available to receive it. Thank you for having the courage to look at what you've been carrying, for being willing to question whether staying attached serves you or traps you. Thank you for considering that maybe the real work isn't getting them to see you, but you finally seeing yourself, recognizing your own worth, offering yourself the recognition you've been seeking from someone who never could give it. Your value isn't determined by whether they chose you. It's inherent, constant, real, whether they see it or not. And learning to believe that, to build your life on that foundation, is the real journey home. Until we meet again in the next exploration of what it means to love yourself as deeply as you've been loving someone who was never actually available,